Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Wendy Rees and I'm an improvement manager with the Emergency Care Improvement Support Team and part of the faculty running the Modern Ward Round Collaborative with some of my colleagues on the call today. This is the third of our keynote speaker sessions from our learning and sharing event that we're running throughout the day. At 1 o'clock, if you're still able to join us, we've got a poster exhibition from some of the trusts who have done some QI pieces of work around ward rounds, and we'd love you to join us on that 1 o'clock today. So, but for this session, I've got the pleasure in welcoming Dr. Andrew Molyneux. He's a respiratory consultant from Sherwood Forest Hospital. He's led many QI programmes, I've been led to believe, and often these have been influenced by Audit. He's going to speak to us today about some of his experiences, and I'd like to hand over to you, Andy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wendy. I'm very grateful for you inviting me today. I'm actually having some minor issues with sharing my screen. Hold on, just years of medical training here, people, phoned home to a fine point. Let's just see if I can share that screen. Oh, okay, leave that, deny that, okay.
We've got a backup, Andy, if you need us, so I'll let you carry on for a bit. Perfect.
Okay. Can you see my presentation? Yeah. If you can, you can. Yeah. You see the first slide. Okay, great. Okay, so very kind of you to invite me today, Wendy. Thank you for that introduction. And the title I was actually given initially was Quality Improvement versus Audit, but I think I'm hoping to show actually that it's not such a sort of confrontational thing, that there's lots of overlap. And the examples I'm going to be giving you today really relate to the work that Dan Smith and I actually have done, so on acute non-invasive ventilation. So it's going to have quite a respiratory flavour. A little bit about myself. So you may have looked at my biography. I've been a consultant for 17 years. I've got a special interest in sleep and ventilation, as well as in airways disease, asthma and COPD. Because of the quality improvement work that we've been doing, I've been fortunate to become a member of the British Thoracic Society Quality Improvement Committee. And I've also done quite a bit of work with NICE, chairing a variety of committees, melanoma and the asthma committee currently, and previously the COPD chair. I don't have any conflicts of interest to declare beyond that. This is where I work. It's Kingsmill Hospital, which is part of Sherwood Forest Hospitals. We're in North Nottinghamshire. If you don't know the area, it's a poor, mixed, rural and urban area, former mining community. And I've got this sign up here which says that we're proud to be rated good by the CQC and outstanding for our care. And I show that with good reason, because if you type in Sherwood Forest Hospitals and CQC, you'll find pretty quickly that we were in special measures for some time, which was a painful experience, and one that I'm very pleased to say that we're out of the last few years, and that what we did with NIV actually contributed to our improvement rating from CQC. So it's a bit of a journey to describe as well. This is where I work. We have a shiny, new and therefore very expensive a PPI building. That's where I work. I wanted to be in the blue cyanosed tower on the left, but instead they gave me the Pseudomonas green tower in the middle. But that's Ward 43, which is just in the middle there. Okay, great. So in terms of what we're going to be talking about then, I'm going to chat a little bit sort of broadly. Just getting quite a bit of background noise. If somebody can, someone sounds like they're moving furniture. So thank you. I think it's gone quiet. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about audit and quality improvement in sort of broad and general terms. And then I'm going to focus on talking quite a bit about non-invasive ventilation, particularly its role in exacerbations of COPD. We'll talk about the size of the problem, the evidence for its effectiveness, and how we've been doing. There is an important study to describe, the NCPOD NIV study, which has led to lots of changes, recommendations, guidelines and standards. And then I'm going to spend some time talking about what we've done here at Sherwood Forest in terms of our NIV service particularly our QIPs and our audits, and then a little bit at the end about the future and especially the impact of COVID. So here's a slide that I've put together just to sort of stimulate debate and conversation. Audit versus quality improvement. Now, I mean, I did audit when I was a junior doctor, and that basically means it's very old hat indeed. It's been around for a long time. And much of what I feel when I do audit is it's kind of cycle and recycle. It's routine, relentless, dull. The nature of it is it's intermittent, by which I mean interminable. And if you've ever had to do case note audits or consent audits or antibiotic audits, just seem to go round and round, and they just largely seem and feel like a box to tick. And do they really lead to change? I mean, that's the question. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Quality improvement's different, isn't it? It's the new kid on the block. It's all exciting. All the words are doing words, aren't they? They're action. And I've put exclamation points here, but that's because we plan, we do, we study, we act. There's excitement and there's buzzwords. You know, you'll be talking to somebody and they'll be waxing lyrical about Six Sigma, and then suddenly they get this messianic gaze and they start talking to you about how Toyota are going to teach you to run your ward better. It's continuous, and it's not a box to tick, it's a box to click. It's new and exciting. And the words themselves, quality and improvement, feel the quality. So is that it? Is it quality improvement is the king? You know, audit is dead. Is that real? Well, I don't think so, actually, because I think actually there's overlap between the two. Audit is well established. It's looking generally at everyday clinical care, and it can be continuous. There are local audits, but I think the real power lies in national audits, and especially when they're combined with national and international standards and drivers of change. And at the end, I'll probably touch upon this, which is about some of the work that the audit and continuous data collection can deliver, particularly in stroke and cardiology, because I'm deeply envious of them. Quality improvement by its nature is a continuous process with data collection, and I feel quality improvement is a more active process. You design an intervention, you test it, you implement it, and then it's iterative, isn't it? You repeat and improve, and you have your PDSA cycles and so on. And so actually, I think they overlap. Audit can inform quality improvement, and likewise, quality improvement can inform audit. So I think that they're complementary, really. Okay. That's some general principles about what we think about audit and quality improvement. Let's have a think about non-invasive ventilation generally and apply it to acute exacerbations of COPD particularly. So first off is, how big a problem are we facing? Well, you don't need to be a respiratory physician to know that COPD is common. It's the second commonest cause of admission to hospital in the UK, 115,000 admissions per year. For my trust, which is a medium-sized district general hospital, that's 850 admissions per year. Going back many years, we have studies and audits that show that about 1 in 5 patients who have an acute exacerbation of COPD have this thing, acute hypercapnic respiratory failure. It's the modern name for type 2 respiratory failure with acidosis. That is, your oxygen, your PO2 is low, your PCO2, your carbon dioxide is high, and your acidotic, your pH is low. Unfortunately, we've yet to find a short and buzzy word to describe this, but AHRF is the kind of the modern way of describing it. So about 1 in 5 admissions when they come into hospital have AHRF, which is kind of the starting point in terms of thinking about non-invasive ventilation. Actually, 1 in 5 of those actually get better with initial treatment, with medical treatment. And that's a study actually that goes back over 20 years. It seems to be as relevant today as it is then. So this is an audit, it's a little bit old, but the audit again is showing about 1 in 5 patients have acute hypercapnic respiratory failure on their first gas. So that would be equivalent to about 23,000 COPD patients who might need NIV, or 170 in my trust, in my organisation. So it's a big problem. Where is the role of NIV in this population? Well, the role is really in people who've got persistent acidosis, despite having received optimal medical therapy. Optimal medical therapy is controlled oxygen, antibiotics, nebulizers, steroids, and repeating the gas within half an hour to an hour. And when that is done, you can see there's a massive impact in terms of reducing your need for invasive ventilation, reducing deaths. The risk ratio for dying is 0.4. It shortens hospital stay. It reduces readmission and it's cost effective. I've quoted here NNTs. So just to help you understand that, if you're not familiar, NNTs are number needed to treat. So how many people do I need to treat to get my preferred outcome? And as a comparison, statins, cholesterol-lowering drugs in the prevention, secondary prevention of cardiovascular disease, the NNT is 80. And there are people out there who say we should put it in the water supply. The NNTs for NIV are much, much lower. 8 to prevent a death, 5 to prevent intubation. So it's a very effective treatment. I like to quote this particular trial. Again, it's a trial that's 21 years old in its publication, the YONIV trial. And so this is good British evidence. And one of the reasons I like it is because it's performed, or was performed, in hospitals like mine. It was mainly done in district general hospitals in Yorkshire, and it was mainly done on general respiratory wards like mine. So it's a study that's close to my heart. They gave treatment to people who had mild acidemia, pH of 7.26 to 3.5. They excluded pneumonia, and these were COPD exacerbations. And the control group, who received that optimal medical therapy we discussed, they had a 20% mortality. The treatment group with NIV, there was a halving of mortality. So we've got good evidence here from trials performed in my kind of hospital and my kind of wards that show that NIV is very effective. 21 years have passed. How have we been doing then? Badly. I think that's fair to say. Here is proof, if you want proof, that repeatedly doing an audit does not lead to improvement. A series of audits performed by the British Thoracic Society, my specialist society, looking at NIV between 2011 and 2013, showed actually that mortality was rising. It's around about a third. Remember, the control group in YONIV, who didn't even get NIV, their mortality was only 20%. So why is there that excess mortality? Well, part of that is because YONIV excluded people who had pneumonia. There was a significant number of people with pneumonia and consolidation in the audit, and that's clearly associated with the greater mortality, 43 versus 28%. Also, if you're going to give NIV, you need to give it promptly. And certainly in people who are waiting more than a day to go onto NIV, there was greater mortality as well. And if you look at a further audit performed by the BTS and the Royal College of Physicians the year after, the time to get onto NIV was long, over 4 hours. There was a wide variation in NIV services, and even people who probably should have been on NIV, a third of them weren't even getting it. So there clearly were real issues with the delivery of care. We have a problem. We have a problem. How have we addressed that? Well, this is one of the key things that I'm going to talk about now, which is about the NCPOD study and the report that came out of that, looking at acute NIV, inspiring change. NCPOD, the National Confidential Inquiry into Patient Outcomes and Deaths, have been around for over 20 years. In fact, actually, when they started, they were actually National Confidential Inquiry into Perioperative Deaths. And a lot of the work they did initially is one of the reasons why your house officer doesn't do an appendectomy overnight, because they showed that that was pretty hazardous. They're funded by government, but are independent of it. And what they specialise is in detailed confidential reviews of cases. You can't just click a button and ask them to do a review. You make a proposal to them because it takes time, money, and lots of people to do it. But the British Thoracic Society went to them and said, look, here is the data on NIV. There's clearly problems. Mortality is rising. There's variation in care. And then NCPOD agreed to do a study on acute NIV. In terms of what that study involves, there's an advisory group that's set up. There's a very detailed questionnaire, 115 stems. And this questionnaire was done and applied to all acute NIV admissions in February and March 2015 to UK hospitals. I was a clinician working in Sherwood Forest, and I did those reviews and completed those questionnaires for our patients, but I also worked with NCPOD, who then do a kind of peer review process. They actually got copies of the notes, filled out the questionnaires independently, so you're sort of triangulating data. It's a very detailed work. Neither audit nor quality improvement, really, to be honest with you, but on the edge of research, really. Lots of detailed data analysis, both quantitative and qualitative, many hundreds of cases from most of the acute hospitals in the UK. And the results were disappointing, perhaps not surprising given what we've seen from the audits, but disappointing all the same. Care of these patients was rated as less than good in 80% of cases. Mortality was high, although sadly comparable with the national audits, and it varied with diagnosis. COPD was better, although that's still in excess of the control group in UNIV. Heart failure was very poor. The more acidotic you are, the worse your outcome, the higher your mortality. Pneumonia again, associated with a greater mortality. And then when you look at delivery of NIV, there are some real issues. We think of NIV as a specialist treatment, but the truth is in 3/4 of these patients, they were started by non-respiratory specialists. So many people at the front door, emergency guys and the acute physicians. There were significant delays in over 1/4 of cases. There were insufficient blood gases. The ventilator wasn't managed properly. And, you know, I can go down to my emergency department and ask any nurse there, what are the target saturations for a patient with COPD? And they'll tell me 88 to 92%. But can that be delivered? The NCPOD study would say not. You know, less than 1/3 of patients were actually achieving target oxygen saturations. We also have an organisational audit, and that raises just as many questions and concerns. 40% of hospitals lacked capacity to deliver NIV. Almost a half of them had staff who weren't really competent in NIV, delivering that care to acute NIV patients. Over 1/4 had some kind of serious incident or safety event in 2015, but less than half were doing annual audits, and less than 1/4 were routinely collecting data on NIV episodes. So how do you know you have a problem if you're not even looking? So lots of food for thought, really, in terms of the delivery of NIV there. And so what should we be doing? Well, inspiring change. The NCPOD report gave many recommendations. At the same time, the British Thoracic Society and the Intensive Care Society were publishing guidance about how to manage people with acute hypercapnic respiratory failure. And then naturally, the British Thoracic Society produced some quality standards, things to achieve. And this is good, I've highlighted them in red, but many of them are kind of measurable metrics, you know, particularly time for starting NIV, in terms of from admission to hospital, and also between having a blood gas and starting on NIV. And these actually were published in August of 2018. So we know that there's a problem. We've got some recommendations. How do we apply that to Sherwood Forest? Well, a little bit of history and background. We're a medium-sized district general hospital, 546 inpatient beds, of which at the moment 72 are respiratory, although it flexes up in the wintertime more towards a kind of the 90s. We currently have 13 consultants, so at the time we were doing this work, it was about 9. We've had a respiratory support unit where we cohort our acute NIV patients for over 15 years, and it's grown and it's grown and it's grown to meet demand. The beds are protected, but if you have protected beds, you know that if you're on a medical ward, they can be open to any medical patient. We've put a lot of time and money into nurse training. We have an e-learning package for our junior doctors, and we actually appointed a group of Band 6 acute respiratory nurses specifically to deliver NIV, and we've got the equipment and we've got the consultant support. So if you look at that, you think, well, okay, we should be good, shouldn't we? We've got all the things that we need to deliver good NIV care. What we set out to do was a series of pieces of work, a patient audit, a service audit, looking at both how we deliver care and also the capacity of our service. We looked at the NCPOD recommendations and what at the time with the BTS quality standards, and then we spoke to as many people as we could. And we didn't just speak to ourselves. You know, it's not just to respiratory nurses and consultants and physiologists who are like the lung function guys who run our home NIV service. We also went to the guys at the front door. Remember, 3/4 of cases were started by non-specialists at the front door. So we talked to our guys in our emergency department, our acute medics, and we did multiple ground round presentations. And we basically reviewed and improved all our documentation. We developed and improved our policy. I'm going to show you our NIV prescription and pathway in due course. We also introduced an admission and escalation policy, revised our e-learning, we even did SIM training, and we did many other things which I'm not going to touch upon today, but you can find reference to. I'll give you reference in a second. We also used the technology where we could, so we had an online dashboard, particularly to collect our service level data, which again, I'll show you that in a second. And then we repeated our audits. If you want to look at our work in a bit more detail, you can find that on the BTS website. If you type in BTS NIV QI, you'll get to the quality improvement toolkit, and as is the case study that's there. So BTS QI NIV, just type it into Google and you'll get the hit, and you can see him, and Dan and I and Justin, our audit leader, we wrote a document and shared lots of information. Okay, so here's our baseline audit. So you remember, we've got nurses, we've got beds, we've got consultants on the ward every day. What could possibly go wrong? Well, when we actually did the audit, we were disappointingly the same as everybody else. You know, a third of our patients were dying. The time for admission to blood gases was extraordinary, 272 minutes. It took a lot of time to get from coming through the door to getting on NIV. And even when you've got a blood gas, you know, to get onto NIV was taking a median of 164 minutes. And remember, the targets here are in red here. They're way north of the targets. Documentation was poorly completed. We had a pre-existing prescription form that wasn't well completed. And if you look at just one aspect of care, are we repeating gases? Are we acting on them? No, not really. It's all quite disappointing. What we then have done is a number of things. So this is the front page of our latest version of our NIV prescription and pathway, which you can see it's kind of like, it's sort of like an idiot's guide to lead you through in terms of who you're going to start on NIV. And we upgraded, this is our version 2 of our NIV e-learning module, which is very popular and gets lots of feedback. We encourage our junior doctors to do this. Remember, we're talking to lots of people, doing lots of grand rounds. And what we showed was, here's the results of a repeat audit performed after the introduction of these changes. We showed that there was a fall in the time from admission to NIV, not quite significant, but certainly a big fall, and a significant fall in the time between blood gas and NIV as a result of that. Oops, Daisy, I do apologise. I'm not quite sure what's happened there. I do apologise. Let me just here we go. Great. Old man and technology, eh? And look, Dan and I, therefore, as a result of this, we won a prize. It was presented at the BTS summer meeting, which was very nice. And we even got into the medical press. This is a screenshot from the Limbic, which is an online medical news resource which I use. And here I've said here, look at it. I was honest with them. I said, you know, our improvement probably reflects an increased focus on NIV as part of our QIP work in general, not just the chart itself. And also, the Limbic were very kind. My mother's dreams came true. I was promoted to become a professor. How touching. I still can't get them to to take this down, because I am just a doctor, I'm not a professor. But for many months afterwards, I got lots of Dear Prof emails, I was constantly wiping a tear from the corner of my eye. It's one of the unsung benefits of doing QIP. Okay, so we've talked about what the prescription did to patients. How about the service review we did on the ward? And we wanted to know, you know, what makes up good capacity on the ward, makes the service work well. So we asked ourselves 5 questions every day on our 9 AM board round. And this is a bit over 2 months worth of data, autumn going into winter of 2017. First of all, have we got beds? Is there capacity for a new NIV admission? Have we got a protected bed? And the answer is not really. Only about 40% of the time at 9 AM did we have a bed. Do we have nurses? We want to be able to provide outreach and also to deliver 1 to 2 nursing care in terms of acute NIV patients. Only about a third of the time do we have sufficient nurses to do that. Do we have a consultant to review the patients? Overwhelmingly, yes, but on a few days we didn't have a consultant. Do we have enough equipment to give NIV? And yes, we did. And one of the key things about delivering NIV is you need a working blood gas machine. And we had one of those pretty much all the time. We were also interested in the flow of patients. Most of our admissions come through our emergency departments, and so we've got a bit over a year's worth of data here. And we showed over these admissions, almost a third of them were 4-hour breaches. Now, whatever you think about the 4-hour target as a metric, you know, as that saying, as soon as you make a metric a target, it ceases to be an effective metric. But here we are. I don't think that a third of our patients sitting in resus in ED waiting for an IV is a good idea, and certainly neither do our ED consultants and our bed team either. So it's just another piece of information that was useful for us. Here's a picture of some of our team. In the centre is Justin, who was then our ward leader. Debs is one of our deputy ward leaders, and she's holding Justin's shiny red sack, which is a bag that holds the NIV and various other bits of kit. We don't have this. This bag is bloody heavy. We now have little suitcases on wheels, which are better. And this is Paul, who's one of our band sixes and staff nurses there. On the back, you can see we've got a big telly, and that actually is our service quality dashboard with the results. I'll show you that. This is what it looks like. It's on our intranet, and it allows us to enter data as we're going down through here. And here is the output. This is from a day in May, and you can see the overall score. We're asking 5 questions, so we're actually doing pretty well on this week, actually scoring 5. But here we're scoring 4. What's the problem? Well, we're lacking in nurses. And look, a flag that refers to our escalation policy says contact duty manager to discuss availability of additional nurses. So that's all we're doing. We're measuring it. We've got an escalation policy, and we had buy-in from our bed managers as well to understand what we were doing. And how did that work? Well, when we repeated the service audit after introducing this, we found that we had significantly more beds, significantly more nursing capacity, a little bit better in terms of respiratory consultant reviews, and the other things were much the same. So I just should point out, it's not like we actually made more beds. We had the same number of beds as we had before. It's not like we had more nurses. We were just working in a smarter way, and that improved our capacity and led to a significant improvement in our capacity to deliver all things, which again, I think Dan presented this in a subsequent BTS meeting as well, showing this improvement. Can we sustain that? Well, when you look at the quarterly data going from that, you can see that it has dipped off. The issue actually isn't in nursing, which is a really, really good thing. We're using our team more effectively, but the issue is actually in bed capacity. And actually, when you look at bed capacity by days of the week, this is a familiar pattern. You know, I've just done a ward round just now. It's September. By God, it feels like winter. So capacity is not a unique issue for us, but something that we do struggle with, particularly at the beginning of the week. The other important outcome for me is the bottom line of the bottom line, which is death. And here is some data that we've also presented at the BTS, showing improvement in mortality. Case numbers actually went up initially. I think that's because we're raising our profile. Length of stay is staying the same, but mortality has fallen quite significantly there, which is very reassuring. And so we're delivering on that as well. Of course, what comes next is another national audit. And that's important because, I mean, this audit followed on from the BTS quality standards. It's actually a quite short turnaround time because the quality standards came in August, and here we are doing an audit in February and March. Lots of hospitals, many patients. Mortality nationally does seem to be dipping down, certainly from the heights of some of the previous studies. In terms of our data, I think mortalities, remember this is 2 months over winter, spring, so maybe a slightly higher than that over the whole year. I also look at another important metric, which is good acute NIV teams link up with good domiciliary NIV services and are well structured in terms of encouraging NIV discharge. So nationally, about 15% of patients were discharged on NIV, and for us, it's almost 40%. So I think that's a marker of a good and active and sort of forward-looking service. We then repeated that audit last year, again, February and March 2020, and showed a kind of stable number of cases, and mortality is pretty stable as well, in the right kind of ballpark, with a stable number of people going home on NIV as well. Now, I don't know if you remember February and March of last year, but I do, because as we were finishing off this audit, of course, COVID was coming in. Sorry, just a quick summary slide of all the other things that we've been doing as well. But I mean, COVID became a really big thing. And the tricky thing is non-invasive ventilation is an aerosol generating procedure. And therefore, we almost stopped NIV overnight. We certainly stopped doing NIV outreach because going down with a ventilator into resus is pretty hazardous activity, really. We had to use modified gear, but we're slowly restarting now, and there is a big pressure to restart and expand. The last 18 months have shown us that the UK lacks capacity to support patients, particularly patients with COVID. Recovery RS, which is the respiratory support recovery trial, is just published in the last month and shows that CPAP is a beneficial treatment for COVID pneumonia. And there is now national drive to expand capacity of RSUs. Our RSU is 8 beds. The guidance suggests we should have 20, which is a really huge expansion in terms of beds, numbers and staff. But that is the future. So in summary then, I think and I hope I've shown that audit and quality improvements overlap and are complementary. Audit alone is insufficient. I think it's an old saying, the more you weigh the pig, weighing the pig more does not make it heavier. You have to feed the pig to make it heavier. And feeding the pig in kind of performance terms, I think, is particularly about national standards and drivers for improvement. I'm a respiratory physician. We're lovely people. We're too nice by half. No stroke physician, no cardiologist could stand looking at that data for NIV and COPD, and they don't. They don't because they've got national drivers. They've got stroke audits and the central audit, which is continuous data collection. I can see data in the East Midlands where I work at the performance of local stroke units. NICOR, which is based down in London, leads the cardiology audits, and particularly MINAP, which is when I was a lad, MINAP was all about thrombolysis for MI. Now it's about PCI. They drive improvement, and that's what you need as part of it. In terms of our local experience, I think the important things were having a good team, having the time to do this kind of work, and collecting data. I actually thought it was cost neutral. I think we need a bit more help now, and particularly in sort of hands and getting ourselves back into the saddle after COVID. In terms of our acknowledgements, there are a few people I want to highlight here. Justin's at the front here. He's no longer our ward leader, although we're hoping to get him back into doing NIV training, which is really his area of expertise. Michelle's one of our band sixes here. She's now our ward leader, continues to lead. There's the shining head of Daniel Smith at the back there, smiling. A few other people as well. Lucy's one of our junior doctors who helped. Sam, our audit clerk. And this is Helen. Helen's great. She's our receptionist and she does a lot of our data entry. So it's a real team job in terms of what we're doing. That's it. Any questions at all? I get there.
Thanks, Andy. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed that. And you brought audit and quality improvement to life with that clinical example. And I'm personally really interested in NIV, especially home-based NIV. So thank you very much for that example. Any questions from anybody? Please raise your hand or pop it in the chat box. There were a couple of comments from Andrew, Rochford and Dan around sort of audit, and I think I was reflecting on the fact that the way we design an audit, we can design audits ourselves. We don't have to use national audits. The way we design audits is really interesting, isn't it? Because you can make them really good and engaging for people to use. And some of the examples you gave, Andy.
The majority of clinic is virtual, but it'll be punctuated with a face-to-face review. So,
sorry, you've got your mic on at the moment. Somebody.
Yeah, thank you. Andy, if you stop sharing your screen, only because I can see myself typing. It's really
I must apologise.
Don't worry.
I
think there we go. Oh, thanks, Andy. I'm just reflecting back the fact that audit can be quite engaging and exciting. And I think what came across in your talk was very much that everybody involved in audit. And I love your dashboard. It makes audit part of what you do, isn't it? So that's a really good way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I think, and Dan, feel free to chip in here, but credit to Dan for much of the work. I mean, obviously, Dan is forced to say that he owes everything to me, but I couldn't have done that work without Dan and especially the IT side of things. Dan, did you have a question or want to make a point?
Well, it's a question that we've discussed over a cup of tea or a beer before, but what do you think the barriers are for not just respiratory but other specialties of turning these national audits into QI, or turning these national audits that we do once in a blue moon into a continuous audit collection? Because that was the key for the cardiologist and the stroke, wasn't it? Is that it wasn't a one-off audit, that they do these things. It's integrated into their day-to-day care. So you talked about cost neutral. What's the key, do you think, for because we've got such a wide range and multidisciplinary range of attendees today from different specialties? What's the key to turn audit into QI, do you think?
I think there are two levels to that, really, Dan. I mean, I think at a local level, you need engagement and enthusiasm and a team that's willing to take that forward. And actually, if you've got a team who are engaged in delivering good quality care, one of the revelations to me was just how many people were keen to get on board. As soon as you give them that opportunity, they've got ideas. They're buzzing with ideas. They see stuff every day, and you can see them, oh God, not this again. Well, actually, there's a solution, and sort of handing power to a broader team, trying to make it not about a single individual or ourselves, is a really key part of that. In terms of turning that into sustainable quality improvement on a grander scale, which is my my personal bugbear, I think that does need national drivers as well. I think, if you look at what's happened in cardiology and stroke, the PPCI agenda for cardiology, that's it's over 10 years old now, isn't it? That really was pushed forward by the cardiology and stroke networks as well, for thrombolysis for stroke. So I remember being involved in the Darcy review, for those of you who have a memory, looking at the delivery of acute services and stuff, and a lot of stuff came out of that that drove PPCI and stroke. And we need that. I think if there's anything to learn for respiratory from COVID, it's that we need more respiratory support, and I'm hoping that that's going to be a driver to expand provision of respiratory support across the UK. And for that, I think that needs money, metrics, and a drive for it.
Yeah, thank you. We've got a question from Zaldina, hopefully I pronounced your name right, from Sandwell in West Birmingham, around the number of outreach nurses you have for NIV, please, Andy.
So there's a story around that, which is that we ran with vacancy, and this is, if you go to the BCS, it's on the QI website, isn't it, Dan? Actually, the funding and staffing thing. So we ran with vacancy for a long time, and therefore had lots of agency nurses, which anyone working in the NHS knows that agency nurses, they like, they bring a packed lunch, which is usually foie gras, within Melba toast. They cost that much, they might as well be shopping at Fortnum's and Mason. And so we were really struggling, and we were really struggling to appoint Band 5 nurses, newly qualified nurses, even though we thought we were doing good things. And so actually, credit to Justin and our matron as well, Carly, for doing this. They said, well, actually, let's go up for Band 6s. Let's bring this role together. And then we attracted lots of people, not from just within, but without. We appointed 6, actually, and it's a number that's just specific to us, that allows us to have 24/7. We have a floating coordinating nurse who then can step in to deliver NIV or do our NIV outreach. Somebody in resus, you grab the bag, you grab the trolley, go down there, and that's one of the key reasons for doing it. So I don't want to say that 6 is the magic number, because clearly 7 is, but for us that was the right number, and that's actually, I mean, we proved that led to a huge reduction in agency spend. So we actually appointed more senior nurses and saved £200,000. More? I can't remember. More. Yeah, £200,000 on our spend on staffing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good way of looking at it, especially for I'm a nurse. So that to me is a really good way of attracting people into that type of role. Arvind from Sandwell in West Birmingham, I don't know if you wanted to talk to us about your point. Excuse the puppy. Just before I bring you in, Andrew, Arvind, did you want to talk to Andy about your point around the audit you were talking about in your chat? Sorry.
Sure, Wendy. Thanks for the opportunity, Andy, Prof. Andy. That's all right.
I hope you're standing. Yes, indeed.
I think it's just a Freudian slip, and I'm sure it'll come to fruition very soon.
Chance, no chance.
Andy, the point I'm making is just a point really. I think as a society, we just need to ensure that, as Dan says, that these sort of data collection becomes business as usual, and we need to performance manage at the local level and at the national level or the regional level. That should elevate and standardize the care. So in some ways, why should anyone have to accept there could be delays in initiating an IV at the front door, depending on the vagaries of staffing? Why should that be the case? So I think we just need to sort of ask those fundamental questions. And I think we all know how to start this. I think it's a combination of, at the society level, we need to sort of get documents such as RSU, but then implement it. So right now it's a guidance. We just need to make it policy, and we just need to bring the NHS to help us deliver that, because we know NIV saves lives. So in the same way that thrombolysis and PCI have done, and the same way that HASU has done. So why doesn't NIV get the same profile as a HASU? Would be my question.
Yeah, well, I agree. I agree. I mean, it's 21 years since Paul Plant published that paper, the Honor paper, and here we are. Things are better, but by golly, 26% mortality for NIV nationally. It's bloody shocking, isn't it? And like I say, if it was cardiology, they'd be protesting in the streets out there. But in respiratory, I think the trouble is that we are. I turn a positive into a negative. We're just too nice by half, aren't we? But actually, I think there is political weight behind this, and that's. I don't want to get too political too quickly, because I don't think it's all about that. Because it's clearly about individuals, getting engaged with quality improvement and audit. But nationally, it has to be political. And I think that I'm hoping everything is lining up. Martin Allen's written something for GERFT about what RSU should look like. The college is pushing on the COPD audit and all these kind of things, and I'm hoping that will sustain. That's the. Yeah. He's lovely. He's lovely, by the way. Your puppy.
Yeah, sorry, but he's a bit barky.
That's all right.
For your question. So we've got a couple of minutes left. I'm going to go back to Andrew Rochford, maybe for the last question, but if there is anything else, please pop it in the chat box. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Andy, for your presentation. It's great. And I don't think it's just respiratory physicians who are nice. Gastroenterologists are very nice too.
No. There are the number of presidents of the Royal College of Physicians who've been gastroenterologists in the last year. They're the majority. So I think you're being nice about yourselves, but they're political beasts as well, and that's actually to your advantage.
No comment, but it hasn't escaped our notice. Now, I wonder if I could get you to comment, and it links into a comment that John's made in the chat around continuous improvement. And some of it is around mixing the audit versus QI. So we have a national audit that demonstrates either that we're achieving a standard or under a standard. That can be a bit of a double-edged sword. If you're way off the mark, it can be really demotivating to staff, but raise political awareness with an executive team. You then, create a culture of improvement, and linking John's comments about continuous improvement. But then you improve. Another national audit comes along, and you do better, or even outperform the standards, and then the focus shifts totally off, and you lose momentum, all that kind of stuff. So how do you meet that balance? How do you engage staff in a positive way if the stuff is not going particularly well? How do you maintain that momentum even when others are moving on and want to do things, different things in different areas?
And that's a really good question. Actually, I've got a very simple answer. Well, clearly I don't actually, do I? Because there is no easy answer, is there? I think it's much of it's about team working and engagement. We've been very fortunate to have a team who are engaged to, they really care about what they do. I also recognise it's not perfect because we've been reasonably distracted by COVID in the last, we still are. And I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I present all the lovely data, but I recognise I've lost focus and we've lost focus. I'm very grateful for Dan making me do this presentation, actually, because it really puts my focus back on that. So I think there isn't an easy answer. I think you need good leadership, but you need a good team. A single individual or leaders can't do it on their own. And I've been hugely fortunate to have good nurses, good junior doctors. Dan's been an absolute stalwart, actually, my right-hand man. To do that. Politically, we had good buy-in. We had good buy-in when we started this work, and certainly our chief executive is very aware of what we've done. And being cited in a CQC report actually is really nice. And it can be horrible, obviously. You know, War 43 was good and engaged and helpful, and so that raised our profile as well. And I think continuously engaging with your executive as well as new challenges arise. And so I hope we've covered ourselves in glory the last 18 months with our COVID work as well, which I'm hoping gives us advantage for moving forward. So I tried to dodge your question. I hope I've answered it in some way.
Absolutely fine. Thank you so much, Andy, and thank you to you, Andrew, for that last question. So we've finished this session now. Thank you everybody that's come to listen, and we'll be doing our 1 o'clock poster exhibition. So 15 minutes for a little bit of lunch and a coffee, and please do join us again at 1 o'clock. Thank you, everybody.